All right. Commissioner Blakely,
Here.
Chairman Bradley,
Here.
Commissioner Hallie,
Here.
Commissioner Kine,
Here.
Commissioner Mobley is not here, Vice Chair Sights,
Here.
and Commissioner Wells.
Here.
Great. Next on our agenda is approval of our minutes from January 25th, 2022. Do I hear any motions or discussions?
I move that we approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Katie?
All right, roll call vote. Commissioner Blakely,
Yes.
Chairman Bradley,
Yes.
Commissioner Hallie,
Yes.
Commissioner Kine,
Yes.
Vice Chair Sights,
Yes.
and Chairman Wells, or Commissioner Wells, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, at this time, we're going to open up the floor for a couple oral comments from the public. Members of the public may be heard on any item of interest not on the agenda. Speakers addressing the commission will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Be advised that by law, the commission is not allowed to deliberate or take action on any issues presented during the oral comments. And as you can see on the screen, we have the login information, at which time you'll hear a prompt. And when you have that prompt, it's like raising your hand, and Katie will acknowledge you to be able to have your time on the floor. Again, please keep in mind, it's only going to be 3 minutes per comment. And when you do start, please state your name and begin your comment from there. This is where we have dead air silence, folks.
I'd call in if I wasn't here. Kidding.
That would be funny if you had somebody do that. I think in all our times, I don't think we've ever had one person in the public comment that I know of.
Not at the beginning ever since I've been doing this.
Yeah. Is there a, I've been meaning to ask this of Liz and Katie, is there a minimum time frame that we should be having this open before we look to close the floor on the public comment? Is there a statute or any kind of a guideline on that?
I'm not aware of any.
I'm not either. Normally there would be, we would be in person, so it would be anybody that was present would have an opportunity to speak. I can check though. I'll check and see if in this iteration of the Brown Act, there's a requirement.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about that, and I didn't want us to be recluse in what we should be following. We've been, what, 3 minutes in? I'll entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to close public comment.
Second.
Katie, the floor is yours, I think. Do we need a vote?
We do not need to vote to close public comment.
Okay, thank you for the reminder. I'll probably always ask that.
We technically don't need a motion either. You can close it yourself.
Oh, I
But
can. Well, I'd like to
I
get,
think folks like to make the motion. So,
well, I kind of like a group decision on some of those things too, to make sure nobody has any thoughts on it, but so I guess the next is a point of our agenda is our business, which is the public hearing to consider a recommendation to the Fortuna City Council to amend the Fortuna Municipal Code regarding state mandated procedures for SB 9 urban lot splits and 2-unit projects by amending Title 17 zoning regulations of the Fortuna Municipal Code, Chapter 17.09, standard mandated procedures, and Title 16 subdivisions, Section 16.04.070, urban lot splits. At this time, I will turn the floor over to Liz to give us any staffing background on it.
Thank you, Chairman Bradley and Planning Commission. So this topic was on your agenda at the last Planning Commission meeting. At that time, I gave a presentation of the SB 9 zoning standards, or the SB 9 state law that triggered the council to adopt an urgency ordinance to implement and have a certain set of limited standards under SB 9. It is a state mandate, so we would be operating under the state regulations regardless of any action that the city took. So to have a local code, to implement and set some limited standards is, beneficial to the city in, just knowing, having an order, having direction on how to implement it, and then beneficial to the public. Just clarifies the state standards. So tonight, this is a regular ordinance. The one we're operating under now is an urgency ordinance, which is perfectly valid, but the city attorney suggests that we adopt a maybe more, legally secure or just a regular ordinance. And also it would give us an opportunity to, have some more time to review the code and maybe consider some of the objective standards that might be adopted. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the PowerPoint. It's basically the same one as last time, but I did it. This is too long. Oh, this is it. I thought I shortened it more than that. Okay, I took some out and then I added some. So, but I'm just going to give a much quicker review, maybe for the benefit of the public, and a refresher. There we go. Now we can get to the top. Okay, I guess this is the first one. Okay, so SB 9 requires ministerial approval of urban lot splits. That's just a regular, any size of a single family zoned parcel into 2 parcels, so as small as 1,200 square feet, and also requires ministerial approval of what are called 2-unit projects. That's 2 units on a single parcel. And I showed you this overhead. An existing or a vacant lot may be developed with and 1 additional single family residence. So you end up with 2 per parcel. And then if the subdivision option were pursued, then you could have 2 and 2, so a total of 4, where originally only 1 would be allowed, and that's in any single family zone citywide. So a minimum of 1,200 square feet. These are all under the state, but each lot must be at least 40% of the original lot. So there is some size limitation. So you can't split the lot into something super tiny and then something else really large. It must be, close to 50-50. It require access and utility easements, and offsite improvements are limited. Where SB 9 projects are prohibited in historic areas, wetlands, earthquake zones, high fire hazard zones, FEMA, 100-year floodplain, prime farmland, and lands under conservation easement. So the state law did give some protection to sensitive land issues, land traits. So 2-unit requirements. So the state says that you must allow at least an 800 square foot unit. You can't restrict the size to smaller than that. No setback for an existing structure. So if it's non-conforming, we can't require that to be corrected. Minimum 4-foot side and rear. If the unit, so we can't prevent an 800 square foot unit. Even if the setbacks don't allow it, we must allow up to 4 feet. One parking space per unit, and 0 if it's within a half mile of a high quality transit corridor, which we do not have that type of a bus route, because in Fortuna, for a high quality transit corridor, it must the buses must stop at least once every 15 minutes during peak periods. Rental and occupancy restrictions, short-term rentals are prohibited. For the lot splits, an applicant must live in the residence for at least 3 years, and renters in affordable housing cannot be displaced or required to move out as a result of the development. So the zoning standards that did get adopted. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, so these are the urgency standards, and these are somewhat of open to consideration. These are somewhat restrictive, but they, in that regard, they protect the, the neighborhoods. They put some kind of limitations and prevent that super high density in the existing single family zones. So the under the urgency ordinance that we're operating under now, and under the draft or the code that is in your staff report that's being proposed, the unit size of the SB 9 projects are 500 to 800 square feet for development for a single family residence. ADUs, accessory dwelling units, are not allowed on any SB 9 parcel. The setbacks of the base zone, whatever of the residential zones the project is located in, would be implemented. And the code is written where the 4-foot limitation, or the 4-foot setback that's required by the state, could be utilized. The state law does not allow the zoning standards or the setbacks to prohibit an 800 square foot unit. So that's what would trigger the 4-foot setback. So for a normal, development where the project can be designed with the underlying base setbacks, those would prevail. And if an 800 square foot unit couldn't be built with those setbacks, then it would be allowed to go down to 4 feet. So there's some protection there, and we are still complying with the state law. So, and then offsite improvements where required for health and safety, such as sidewalks for accessibility and safety, and certain limitations like that. And that would be for basically for subdivisions. So the proposed zoning standards, these are the ones that have been added since the last meeting. I did do a review of other cities' SB 9 standards, just to, as I was considering what are the range of code sections that could be considered, and still comply with the state SB 9. So those are the ones basically, it's pretty limited. The state law is pretty restrictive. So most of these are really just expanding on, identifying the standard that would apply, and kind of basically referencing standards, like in this case, referencing a standard that already exists and just calling it out and making it more clear and easier to implement the code. So, for example, lot access. So, as a unit, as another unit is constructed, and it may be behind the main residence, the state law does allow us to, for one, require easements to that second unit, and typically that would more likely be in a subdivision where you're going to split that back lot, and then you would require an easement to access that back lot. But in any case, in either case, whether it's an SB2 lot split or an SB 9 2-unit development, the access that would need to be required would be the standards that are in the municipal code and in the Fortuna improvement standards and specifications. And typically the standard that we do utilize on that kind of a development, say, as opposed to a major subdivision, but in this case, you know, it's going to be a pretty minor lot split. The access way really refers to the driveway that goes to the back, and typically in this kind of a development, we would require the 20-foot standard that is in the code. So instead of calling out the specific, the 20-foot, because there are a couple of other situations, it could be 24, could be 18 to 24 is really the range that we apply based on, you know, the density, the size of the lot, and really typically it's the number of units that are going to be using that lot. And in this, you know, for an SB 9, I would expect that in most cases it would just be adding an extra lot, but you know, there are some other cases where it could go into an area that's more dense and would need the wider, you know, so we have a range of 18 to 24. And then for parking, so in black, that is what you saw at the last meeting. And then I just added a specification, all other parking requirements of the Fortuna Municipal Code shall be required. So that references the city's parking standards. And so I see how I see that being implemented in this case is really the size of the parking space is, what is it, 8.5 by 19 is the minimum parking space size. Usually in a R16 or for a single family development on, you know, say a bigger house or the typical new houses that we see, they actually, you know, develop a larger parking space than 8.5 by 19. You know, 2-car garage, and then the 2 spaces in front of it. That's, you know, that's going to be larger. So the minimum, so we just wanted to reference that parking standard, and then that section that's crossed out is really not necessary because it's just saying that, hey, they can go larger if they want, but I think that's just kind of redundant and obvious and not, you know, and it's not necessary to add that in. It's just extra wordage. And then design standards. This is a proposed standard. So, and it really that this section just references that the unit that's on, so if it's a second unit on a site with an existing house, that the basic design standards of that existing house will be mimicked in the new unit. And then if it's a lot split, let's see, so if it's a vacant lot, then the 2 units shall use similar architectural style, materials, colors, and finishes. And then the third one is that if a garage is converted to a new unit, then the garage door itself will be covered over in materials that match the existing exterior, the wall. So just to blend it in and not have a closed off garage door, you know, basically still visually existing in that unit. So that's a pretty standard kind of a design requirement. So then I just kind of compiled, I'm sorry. So these are the ADU design standards that we have adopted when the city adopted the accessory dwelling unit code back in, I think it was September, kind of to consider additional, these are really similar standards. This is not in your packet, so this is the first new information. So for example, our ADU ordinance allows lot coverage of 50%. And I think I missed adding that code section in the previous slide. So what the proposed code says is that the 35% lot coverage that we have now for single family developments will prevail unless it prohibits an 800 square foot unit. So it's similar in that regard to the setback, where if they can't make it fit, then they can have the reduced setback. So the proposed code says that, hey, if they can't meet our existing 35%, then they can have an exception, an automatic exemption, and have more than 35% coverage. So the ADU, I just thought it was interesting. It just has a standard maximum lot coverage 50%. So that's the only place in the code where that appears. So it's a little more permissive. And then in our ADU ordinance, it says that detached ADUs, the height of a detached accessory dwelling unit shall not exceed 16 feet. So it's basically saying that detached second units are limited to 16 feet. And then they could have an exception with a use permit, which is what we allow for accessory dwelling units. Normally they can just be 15 feet. But they can't exceed that with a use permit and, approved by the planning commission. So that's something to consider for the SB 9 2-unit developments. Does the city want to limit those to a single story if it's detached, or as it's written now, it would allow it a 2-story unit? And then the ADU ordinance, for an attached ADU, they're allowed to be the same height as the residence to which they're to the primary residence. So that's something to consider. And then the ADU ordinance is the entrance orientation. So the main door of the detached unit shall face the front or interior of the parcel. So it's not going to face the neighbor, it's going to face the street or the interior. So those are kind of some ideas to consider. And then for privacy, our ADU ordinance says that to protect the privacy of adjacent properties, the following requirements apply to walls with windows that are within 8 feet of an interior side or rear property line. So those units for a single story, 6-foot fence would be built on the property line, and then the clerestory or translucent windows for all windows, and those are just the small windows that are kind of higher than normal, placed higher on the wall. Are the only types of windows that would be allowed. So it has to, and they also have to be at least 5.5 feet above the adjoining floor. And then for a second story wall, the clerestory or translucent windows are required for all windows facing the adjacent property, so that they're not looking down into the neighbors. And so this is really addressing the 4-foot setback. So since now we're having properties that are more densely built and more highly populated and closer to the property lines, it's felt that it's really the need to protect the privacy of the neighbors, to have this kind of privacy measures. And then the ADU code for second story decks and balconies, that they do have to be 10 feet from the side or rear property line if it's adjoining a single family dwelling. So that's right now that only applies to ADU standards developments. And then I just kind of tossed in some things that came up in other city standards, and I'm not necessarily suggesting these. I just thought, for your information and just to compare and get a feel for what other cities do. So for the maximum size of the 2-unit developments, it's based in the city, it's based on the size of the lot. So if it's a smaller lot, less than 15,000 square feet, then those units are limited to the smaller size, in this case 850 square feet. And that's for 1-bedroom or studios. And then if it's a 2-bedroom unit on a less than 15,000 square foot lot, they can go up to 1,000 square feet in size. And then lots greater than 15,000 feet, that's about 1/3 of an acre, they can go up to 1,200 square feet. Whereas Fortuna's code right now for SB 9 limits them to the units to 800 square feet. And then a lot of cities do have affordability requirements for new units, limited to whatever very low, moderate income categories. And I think those are for cities that, are very proactive in providing affordable housing. So this is a way of allowing, the developers or the property owners to have the higher density properties, but also, something for the city is, hey, okay, we want we want those to be designated for affordable, or, income restricted, families. And then let's see. Oh, this is just another variation of the size based on the parcel size of the unit based on the parcel size. And then, again, there's another, this is similar to our ADU. There's a maximum height of 16 feet. In this case, 16 feet, if it's in the, if it's less than, if it's got like the 4-foot setback. So the setbacks are smaller than what would normally be allowed. But then if that unit does meet the setbacks, then the height can go up to 27 feet if it's within the regular setbacks. So I know these pictures still appeared. I don't know if you wanted to probably not discuss those. And then I'll turn that back to the commission for any questions and discussion.
Anybody have any questions or comments for Liz?
Katie, you can probably take it off of. Oh, I can stop sharing. There we go.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for making those changes that we talked about. Those are very, very easy to understand, Liz. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was pretty straightforward.
So yeah, what I found is that we're really limited on what we can do. The state is really clear on mandating these types of developments. So that's basically what we have. And then, within a certain range, in the urgency ordinance, we've limited the ability to build like large units. And that seemed to be the direction that the council wanted to go. That's something to think about, or just to toss into the discussion as well, is that, some cities want infill development and they want to create more housing. So they might be more lenient on the sizes. So that's another direction, but that would be a recommendation that the planning commission would make. And then, I just feel like I would continue to look at, regardless of what we do tonight, I think it would be my role, and I'd be interested in doing it as well, as to see, what other cities continue to do for those objective design standards. And what I presented to you tonight is really, what I've seen out there, and I haven't seen a lot of variation from, it's really similar to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, where the state said, this is what you have to do, and you don't have very much wiggle room within those objective design standards. So, we've looked at the design, we've got the architectural, requirement to be similar to what you would see in a single family residence. And I think that's, without getting into like minute detail, the siding shall be like this, your roof line shall be this, your shingles and windows and all of that. And most people are going to conform to that anyway, just out of their own self-interest. So
I honestly don't see that this is going to impact our community all that much. The larger, more densely populated areas, I think, will be more affected than we are.
And there's quite a bit of resistance around the state. I was doing some research on this, and there was apparently 71% of the population is opposed. And there are some communities that are actually putting together organized resistance to implementation of this thing. But I have a question, Liz.
Mhm.
So the word ministerial showed up quite a bit, and I'm just curious about your understanding of what that means. I have mine, but I want to make sure it is accurate.
yeah, it's used in land use to indicate a staff approved permit. So for example, a building permit would be ministerial. it's used in different government code sections, like in CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. Ministerial permits are exempt from CEQA. So a building permit doesn't need, environmental report unless, of course, there's exceptions, like is it a wetland site, things like that. If there are obvious, environmental sensitive issues, but otherwise, by state law, a building permit, like staff can't direct a building permit to the planning commission because it's ministerial, and we can't require CEQA because it's ministerial. So that's how, in the land use and planning field, that's what the definition of ministerial is. I don't know.
So in our case, what I understand you to be saying is that then means that it's a staff recommendation that would approve or disapprove anything that fell into this SB.
Yes, that's a good point. That's exactly why we wanted to clarify the standards. So the state, the state standards were a little bit broader. So we can't limit it to less than 800 square feet in size. So, but it doesn't give an upper value. That if staff tried to say, well, you can't have, 1,200 square foot SB9 residential unit, that would be arbitrary. So that's why, certain areas we needed to have a standard. Otherwise, it would be an arbitrary standard. Whereas the state says it has to be an objective standard that we can point to as measurable. And the only discretion, the only time it wouldn't be ministerial is if someone objected to staff's determination that that your standards aren't being met on your permit, then it would go to the planning commission. So they would basically appeal it. So if someone doesn't agree with the staff, they have a process and they would go to the planning commission for an appeal.
That leads to my question, Liz. On page 9 of the summary that you gave us, under the heading specific adverse impacts, it uses the term catch-all exemption. And one of the things I noticed, if you read down further in the terms and definitions, it says the term specific adverse impact is defined to mean a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact based on objective, identified written public health or safety standards, policies, or conditions as they exist on the date of the application is deemed complete. The determination is then subject to the appeal to the planning commission. So I guess if there's one thing that we could input out there is some kind of safety issues. One of the things I'm thinking about is population density. We could look at that as a safety issue. And is there a way for us to identify those things and standards so it would help us to make sure that we don't, and again, I don't see it being a big issue, but it's something that we could use as a, use their word, quantifiable way of controlling some of the density. Help me out here.
Yeah, there's a couple ways the state doesn't allow us to use density. I believe that it actually says that in the state law. And then with that minimum lot size. So the state is saying that you can go as small as 1,200 square feet, and that's going to be pretty dense. So, and that the overall lot size can be as small as 2,400 square feet, which is double.
Well, I guess I'm thinking along the lines, not just so much on the density side, I didn't use the term correctly, but if we were looking at adding more, like 2 homes per lot, let's say, one of the issues it's going to have impact on is our sewer systems, because the pipes may not be able to handle the larger use or capacity, and that could become a public health issue. Are there things that we could put in place to kind of, control some of that, or we can use that for you when it comes to that quote unquote ministerial?
Yeah, I think that's so if, staff would look to something quantifiable in order to, if something did come up on a particular permit, it's a health and safety, issue, we would look to pointing, to something quantifiable. So in the case of, inadequate disposal system, that's actually something that's quantifiable because the Public Works Department can pretty easily do a calculation on, the capacity of a sewer line, and they do it all the time on subdivisions. So, and that's a really good example that you brought up. So all the time, subdividers have to demonstrate that they have the sewer capacity, and they have their engineers prepare that capacity study, or the city can prepare them too. And they may or may not have to upsize the line. So that would be, that's a good example of a potential, denial criteria, and that's something that's quantifiable. I think that meets the state standard.
Same thing with septic, I would think too, based on location of the property and accessibility for maintenance, et cetera, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's how, I don't know if we can list every potential, violation of that. For the health and safety
No, I was just
standard.
looking as an opportunity for you that if it came before us, we know how to address it. What, I don't know if we asked this before. Do we have any HOAs in Fortuna?
Yes, we
And
do.
are they exempt from this based
No.
on their own criteria within the
Um,
HOA?
So they are exempt. I mean, they're not exempt, but their standards can prevent an SB9 project. I mean, they're, what do we call those? They're
CCNRs.
CCNRs. Which is the opposite for the accessory dwelling unit regulations. It said that the state law says that they can't override an accessory dwelling unit. But
Right.
the state law specifically says that they may override.
So double-edged sword.
Yeah, I mean, right now, these are in effect. The SB9 projects are in effect, and I doubt if any, the HOAs, maybe they're scrambling to adopt that, but as far as they can't have that in their requirements right now because it's a new law.
If they could put something in place for their bylaws, that may help them if they need it.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Mhm.
Is there any other discussions? If not, I think I'll open this up to public comment at this time. And Katie, would you mind flashing up the information on the screen for us, for the public to be able to know how to call in and the directions therefore? And then I would also like the public to be aware that when you do call in, the clerk will unmute your phone and you'll hear a prompt that will indicate your phone is unmuted. And at that time, I would like you to state your name and begin your comment. You'll have 3 minutes to comment. It will only be on the topic at hand. No other issues will be addressed at that time. And ideally, Katie, I think this is where I'd like to get that information from you if there's anything out there for a timeline. That way we know when to close public comment.
I'll take a look and then I'll check with Sienna too.
Thank you. Because something I've been thinking about and I just didn't know if there should be a minimum. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think we need to at least give people enough time to, dial, and then having trouble connecting, just give them enough time to manage their call. I don't think we have to wait for people to turn the channel, see what's going on,
Right.
just give it a reasonable time for them to manage their call.
I was just testing our system as we were talking and it appeared to go through, but I hung up. Just wanted to make sure it worked.
That's
I'm
why my
sorry.
participant number kept going up and down.
I got
Good.
pushed out. I'm sorry.
Good.
But maybe you're gonna say it's your brother Daryl and your other brother Daryl calling.
My dad's internet's a little weird, so I got pushed out a minute. I apologize.
Yeah, and it took that long to, for me to get in until I spoke. So it does take time.
Good to know. Thanks, Mark. Well, at this time, while we're waiting, I'll just say this, Liz, I just want to say thank you again. There's a lot of detail I know you had to go through and digest and I guess put it in a place for us to be able to have a nice summary. And I know you had to put a lot of hours in for that, so I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, when over the past year before this came into effect, on January 1st, it was in the, we'd get emails and we knew that it was going through the legislature and the governor's desk. So, cities were starting to scramble the closer it got to the end of the year. So yeah, it was a learning curve and, we kind of pause and, oh, well, here's another state mandate that we're going to have to start implementing. And, we
This is-
operate a lot under state mandates and we don't always appreciate, in this case, as was it Sandy pointed out, there was a huge amount of opposition and
Mike.
the League of California Cities really, did what they could to dissuade the legislature from adopting it because obviously it's something that takes away local zoning ability. But yeah, it was, being directly involved in creating an ordinance, especially in the beginning like this, is really helpful when we get questions from the public. It just makes it easier to help them right up front instead of, oh, well, let's look through the state code. And that's actually what we did with the ADU law, which was adopted by the state, I don't know, 6 or 8 years ago. And we were just operating under the state code until we got our ordinance or local ordinance adopted last fall. So, I kind of learned from that it's better to be upfront with these things instead of scrambling for a while.
I wanted to ask Mike. Mike's the one that brought up the opposition, correct, Mike?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to ask, is that, I'll ask anybody, is that opposing on like county-wide or city-wide in these areas? I tried to look it up and I couldn't find anything about it.
What I did was I Googled, just Googled resist SB 9.
Okay,
I came across, there's the city, I believe it's Los Altos, which is just south of San Francisco, but north of Palo Alto. And it's a very, very wealthy area. I think the average housing cost there is about $5 million. They're claiming that that this SB 9 would create a negative environment for the bobcats and the mountain lions that live there. Probably not going to fly, but that was one I came across. I also came across a poll that said 71% of people in California were opposed to this, but the state did it anyhow.
Yeah.
And I think it's clear to all of us what the objective is, and it's understandable. But if there is, and also there's a term, Liz, that I came up with. It's not rezoning; they call it upzoning. Are you familiar with that? I'm sure you are. Upzoning?
Yes,
That's what they refer to this as. It's upzoning, not rezoning.
wow.
So yeah, that was basically increasing the density.
Right.
Yeah, so that mountain lion story, if that's a good one to look up. It's pretty entertaining. So it's the city of Woodside, which is
Oh, Woodside, that's right.
in that area. And they, a couple weeks ago, they declared that they're exempt from this in one of the allowable environmental categories, habitat, as they claimed that they're citywide, that citywide they are mountain lion habitat. So that was really in the news for a couple of days, and I think they may have declared it officially, but right away the state attorney general wrote them a letter and said, there's no way that you can possibly be classified as mountain lion habitat, because basically the city is built out. They are rural. If looks like a beautiful city with horses and a lot of open space, but also with estates. Really, it's a very well off city. And and I guess Fish and Wildlife gave them a call and said, no, you don't fit the criteria for mountain lion protected mountain lion habitat. So I think it was it today? I think it's just today or maybe Friday that they conceded.
Oh,
So they caused an uproar and probably had to deal with that internally, and they conceded that they were not going to.
It was a good try. Before we get too much further, Katie, no calls. Then I know you said I don't have to make a motion, so at this time I'll close public comment. Am I correct? I don't have to make a motion, right?
Correct. So you may just close it.
So is there any more continuing conversation we want to on this topic? For Liz?
I do have one quick question. All the animations you showed had single family homes. If people subdivided into 4 different homes, would they be duplexes, or do they literally have to be separated homes?
Do you mean the existing homes or the new homes?
The new homes they add.
They
so
can
every
be, yeah, they can be either. They
Okay.
can be detached or attached.
Okay.
Attached could be a duplex.
Okay, just checking, just for
Yeah.
aesthetic's sake.
My input is that I'm in favor of what we're doing because it's good for the city. However, I echo Mike's concerns if he's making those concerns. If not, then I would step out on my own and say that I would like to see the city oppose SB 9 in any way that we can. Perhaps that's impossible, but I'd love to see us do that nevertheless.
We're probably gonna have to do that at the polls.
yeah.
Well, that was what was behind my question regarding the ministerial, because I personally, based on my background and experience, think that there are ways, depending upon the approach taken by the staff, that there are ways to minimize the impact to some degree. And you said there's very little wiggle room, but there's always some. So it would depend upon how the city implements SB 9 and the policies that are carried forth and the attitude of the people that are carrying forth those policies. So, I don't know if there's any kind of statement we could make to the council that would bring that point up, or is there anything we could put in our policies that would send a message to future people making ministerial decisions? I know, there's no problem with the people currently making those decisions, but in the future, it could be a problem.
I think that staff will do their due diligence to cross every T and dot every I in these applications and make sure that all of the bases are covered. If we try to fudge on that, all we're going to do is open ourselves up for a lawsuit, and the city doesn't need that.
Yeah, so I think we would pick up on any, potential issues during the permit review process. you know, any building permit now, we have a really good review team as far as the building official, planning, the city engineer, which covers public works, and the fire department. And sometimes projects will get referred out even to the health department, or, you know, depending on what that particular site. So, you know, we look at the conditions on the property. You know, are there wetlands? You know, we don't technically have any fire hazard or earthquake zones within the city. You know, public works looks very carefully at the capacity and at the connections that you know, that those units are going to make to the city system. You know, the fire department is going to pick up on any fire hazards. They've already talked, their concern with this is high density in the outlying areas where access, you know, vehicle access, or they're concerned about having a second access into the neighborhood, like Home Avenue. It only has one in and out road. So, you know, anything that comes up during that review process, we're going to consider it really carefully. And if it poses a health and safety hazard, then, you know, it could well be that project won't get approved. So we have a good review team that's going to pick up anything like that. And yeah, I can report back to you how it goes. We've had a couple of inquiries back in January about SB9 projects. We haven't had anything since, so I don't know how many we're going to get.
You know, I wish Chris was here tonight, because one of the impacts would be if you get so many homes in a certain area, you get a impact with regards to the trash removal and disposal of, which is an environmental issue and a concern for health as well.
Yeah. Because
of the timeliness and the storage and so forth and so on. But yeah. Is there any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I'm willing to move this along and get a recommendation.
I'll make that recommendation. A recommendation that the Fortuna City Council amend the Fortuna Municipal Code by adding Title 17 zoning regulation, Chapter 17.09 state mandated procedures, and Title 16 subdivisions, Section 16.04.070 urban lot splits.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Katie?
Okay, roll call vote. Commissioner Blakely,
Yes.
Chairman Bradley,
Yes.
Commissioner Hallie,
Yes.
Commissioner Kine,
Yes.
Vice Chair Sights,
Yes.
and Commissioner Wells.
Yes.
Is there anything else on our agenda tonight, Liz and Katie?
Katie, did you want to talk about the Planners Institute? I think you got things, maybe you've already communicated with the individuals, probably.
I believe. So now that Merritt's back, I can get the paperwork signed. So
Okay.
everybody is registered. Everybody has hotels.
Katie, you got turned off. Were you still talking?
I'm having something, it's a bit of a feedback issue. There it goes.
Katie, is there anything you want to talk about with the future meetings at all?
I'm going to send out an invite tomorrow for the next subcommittee meeting. So
That's right.
the next week. And then Liz, I think we're going to be canceling the meeting, the regular meeting on the 22nd, because we have a conflict with city council due to the holiday.
Yes. So they are kicking us out of our Access Humboldt slot.
No?
Does that mean we can meet in person?
Yeah. Well, is there any other staff communications, Liz, on your part too?
No.
Anything going on?
No.
Well, I guess I'm entertain a motion.
Well, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right.
Bird, kidding.